This attempt at a clever title is actually based on a question that I get somewhat frequently from students where, around now, they're starting to read the textbook and they start asking, Ken, do you give study guides? And honestly, if they've heard the How Class Works lecture, I'm actually usually surprised that they ask that, because I would think that from that lecture the answer would be obviously no. Right, study guide for a lot of students is really nothing more than a list of the topics that are going to be on the next test. And you ever had the experience of getting a study guide and seeing the test and finding something on the test that wasn't on the study guide, and you get really, really mad at the teacher? Or maybe you studied something on the study guide and it wasn't on the test, and you get mad for wasting your time studying it. That's not really the way it's supposed to be. My answer to what the study guide is something that you're probably not going to like to hear, and that is, the study guide is the textbook. I honestly want you to remember, to understand, to know it all. Okay? One way you can see that is the entire Noba collection contains over 100 modules. I only picked 40. Right? This is the 40% of the Noba collection that I want you to know. Right? So rather than going further and just picking out and say, hey, you're going to get a test question on this, you're going to get a test question on this, let me give you some guidance about what you can do so that you can seriously know all of it. And not just know all of it for the next test, but to be able to remember it, maybe even forever. Also remember from the How Class Works lecture that, hey, my lectures are really about meaningful learning. And so one of the things this is an application of material related to Quiz 2. I like to call them the memory modules. Okay? And we are going to be focusing mostly on the quizzes, and so it's important for me to actually reveal some limitations of those quizzes and what you can do to overcome those limitations. So you might remember this. I hope I did manage to say this in class on the first day. It's not just do what I'm asking you, it's the way that I ask you to do it. And the reason for that is because these are evidence-based practices. These are techniques that have been shown through, in some cases, more than 75 years worth of research. These have been shown to be the most effective, right? And so think about, what is the single best thing you can do if you want to remember information? And the answer is to practice remembering that information. So that's what the quizzes are. They are an opportunity for you to practice retrieving, to practice remembering the information that you're going to be asked to remember on a future test. Okay? You can and should also think of them as an example of formative assessment. I hope you remember this from your earlier years in school. Formative assessment, kind of low stakes, right? These are only worth 5 points. Low stakes ways for you to find out, how am I doing, right? So you read the textbook, you take the quiz, you thought you understood structuralism versus functionalism, and you get to the quiz question and you get it wrong. So now you know, oh, I need to go back and study that more. Okay. The primary quizzes we'll talk about are the ones that are on Blackboard. There are versions that you take up to 5 times for a grade, and then there are practice versions of those very same quizzes that I will encourage you to take repeatedly, really throughout the rest of the semester. There are also quizzes at the end of Noba modules, but as you'll see over the next few minutes, I'm going to basically probably talk you out of using them, but I want you to know what they're like so you can make that decision on your own. So here's the idea. Again, they're about testing your memory, retrieving, because that practicing retrieval will actually help your memory. So read the modules. Later in this lecture, I will give you some specific techniques to use while you're reading those modules. And then pretend you're taking an in-class closed book quiz. Test your memory. As soon as you finish a quiz, as you probably realize by now, you will get your score. You'll see which questions you got wrong, but it doesn't tell you what the right answer is. Right? That's on purpose. This is sort of the formative assessment part now, where you can go back to the textbook that correspond to the parts of the, with the questions that you got wrong. Now, of course, you could study other parts as well, but pretty obviously you're going to be focusing on the parts of the book that cover the material you got wrong. Okay. By other techniques, I mean these techniques that I haven't told you about yet. The things that you should do while you're studying. Okay. Now, after you've studied or restudied, go back, take the quiz again. Go back and take it again. Again, up to 5 times. Right? And that's how many you can take for a grade. Your grade will be the highest score you get. Suppose you've taken it 4 times and you still don't have all the questions right. Okay, maybe at that point, go ahead and do it as an open book test, an open book quiz. Go ahead and look up the answers to make sure you get them all right, but only that one time. All right? Don't do that in general. I know some students do this because they actually tell me that they do this. It's a very, very poor strategy. Okay? If you just think of this as an open book quiz, you look at question 1 and then you find it in the book, you look at question 2 and you find it in the book, you'll probably get 80 out of 80, 5 out of 5 on each of the 16 quizzes. But you will completely waste what the quizzes are designed to do. Those quizzes are not designed to get you 80 points. They're designed to help you get 550 points on the exams. And then you doing well on the 550 points on the exams, that's designed to help you do well on the whole rest of the class, the short projects and the presentations that you have to give. And I don't know why anybody would do that. It seems like, again, a very poor strategy to get the quick 80 and give up on the whole rest of the class, what it's intended to do. So now, you've taken the quiz a few times, so you got 5 out of 5, which of course corresponds to 15 out of 15 questions in most cases. So you might think, I'm done, right? I got a 5 out of 5. Well, it depends when the test is. Okay? If the test is in 5 minutes, you're probably done. If it's any time after then, you might not be done, right? There's a distinction in this research literature between what we call performance and learning. Performance, that's your current level of performance. You just studied the material, and then you sat down and you took a quiz on it, and you got them right now. Current level of performance. Maybe the test is next week. Maybe it's in 2 weeks. Maybe it's in a month. Are you still going to remember it then? Because that's learning. We have to consider that. So you should probably continue to take that quiz. Okay? After the due date for a quiz, a practice version of that very same quiz will appear in the folder for practice versions. It's right underneath the regular at-home quizzes in the margin on Blackboard. Take as many times as you want. Doesn't matter what your score is, and it's a little confusing because you'll see a score and it will even show up on Blackboard, but it doesn't count. So please don't worry about it. Obviously, it's going to help for the unit exams. You got this thing, this third exam, kind of like a final exam at the end. And the two things that you want to do is space them out. That's called the spacing effect. That means don't take it 5 times today. Take it on 5 different days. Okay? And I do have some data that shows that taking a quiz 5 times on one day is no better than taking it once. Okay? Take as much, put as much time in between those test administrations, those quiz administrations as you can. Give yourself some time to forget. Okay? And then that is what's going to lead to much, much, much more effective memory that will last over a long period of time. Interleaving, another concept from the module. This one it's important, but less so for me. You'll see in some classes it's very, very important. Interleaving just means mixing up your practice, right? So putting the questions in a random order, putting the quizzes in a random order. It's very, very helpful if that's the way the exams are organized. My exams are not. Mine are mostly in order, okay? But you should find out for other classes. So as soon as possible from your professors, ask them if they organize their test questions in a random order. Because if they do, that's the way you need to practice, right? You need to interleave in those cases. Okay, but again, for me, not so important. I told you, the single best thing, right? And of course, the only reason you're allowed to say something's true in psychology, somebody did the research, it really, really does work, okay? But I do find that sometimes that students, they're just not completely convinced by the research. Oh, it was done a long time ago, it's done on different people at different schools. So what I do is I keep track every single semester. So I have every intention of doing that this semester, and after the first exam, showing you your own results. And I'm very, very confident that the results are going to come out exactly the way I'm about to show you, because they always do. Not once has there been not a single exception to patterns like this. Okay? Now, don't worry so much about the exact labels on the bottom, because I have different ways that I have asked people to do the quizzes. Just realize on the left side, these are people who didn't take any practice quizzes. On the right side, those are people who took the most. And it does not get much clearer than that. Right? The more quizzes you took, the better your score on final exam on the multiple choice part. Unfortunately, if you look at that left column, I have students every semester who, for whatever reason, choose to take 0 practice quizzes. And that average percent is about a 58%. Okay? And then all the way up to the people who took the quizzes for practice 3 more times, that's a 87% average. But it actually gets better when you look at the percentages of students in each column who got a D or an F. All right, so again, looking at the left, best way to get a D or an F, don't take practice quizzes, 85%. You might look at that and say, hey, I'm a risk taker. 15%, I'll be in that 15%. I can do it. Well, this is just one particular semester. I had another semester I could have shown you where one single student who didn't take practice quizzes got above a D. I don't like those odds. I don't think I would take that. Okay, and then all the way over to on the far right, nobody. Right? 0% who took the practice quizzes enough got a D or an F. But it gets even better, because 92% of those students got an A or a B. Best way to get a D or an F, don't take practice quizzes. Best way to get an A or a B, take practice quizzes. Simple as that. This one will seem a little repetitive, but it's just a different semester. So let me focus on the differences. Here, I just put people in the right column if they took any practice quizzes. I put them in the left column if they didn't. And this is 5 different sections listed separately in a given semester. In the previous slide, the sections were all combined together. Okay, notice same basic pattern. Took practice quizzes way higher than if you didn't. You might look and say, well, geez, some of these scores are 78, 79%. That's not very high. Well, if you took one single practice quiz, you're on the right side of this. Okay, so of course it's going to be less. Really, the more important thing is to look at the rows. See, 2 of these sections are honors sections. Okay, it's the first 2. Now, some students think about honor students, they say, oh, they're just different. They're smarter, they're born smarter. No, they're not, okay? Because you know what honor students who don't do the work look like? They look like non-honor students who don't do the work. There is no difference between those 5 rows on that left column, right? You do the work, you're going to be successful. As I said a few minutes ago, there are quizzes that are at the end of every module on Noba, and they have some nice features. I really, really wanted to like these because they're what they call adaptive. So you take it once, and then if you get a question wrong, you'll see that one earlier. You'll see that more the next time you take it. There are a lot of questions. There are, I think, 20 or 30 per module, but the problem is sometimes there's not 20 questions worth of material in a module, and so the questions end up being kind of trivial sometimes. Dates, I never care about dates. Names, remember the only time you're going to need to know names is when I specifically tell you need to know somebody's name. And so you'll just find too many questions in there that you're not going to have to know. But I could imagine, if you kind of figure me out and you realize when you're seeing a question that's not going to show up on a test, or maybe you want to remember more of the details anyway, you could conceivably find these quizzes useful. But I will tell you, I have never had a student come back at the end of the semester and say, hey, Ken, I took the quizzes at the end of Noba throughout, and they were really, really helpful. So I think you'll be fine doing the ones that I'm asking you to do. That's honestly enough work anyway. Okay, so now, think about sitting down and taking a test in here, and you see a question that you have literally answered 10 times already because of taking the quiz for a grade and then taking it for practice. Are you going to get that question right? Of course you are. Right? And that's obviously what research has shown. Right? The clearest benefit is for the exact items that you have actually practiced retrieval on. But the beauty of this technique is it doesn't even need to be the exact same items. As long as we're talking about the same concepts, closely related material, practicing retrieval on my specific questions will help you to remember that material with a different question. You're going to see both on the exams. You'll see some of the exact same questions. You'll see some that are kind of similar questions, but not the exact same ones. Okay. But as you might guess, as you might realize, suppose there's something on a test that didn't show up in any way on a quiz. You haven't practiced retrieval at all, you haven't been focusing on it, so that material ends up being remembered worse. And you have to be aware of that. And the answer is, you don't need to rely on me. Okay? You don't need to rely on any individual instructor to give you opportunities to practice retrieval. Do it by yourself. And that's what makes this universally usable, right? In any class, you can practice retrieval as often as you want. Come up with flashcards. Get an account on Quizlet and do electronic flashcards or do paper ones. Use in this guide to studying, I'll tell you in a couple minutes, practice retrieval continually throughout your reading. Okay? So here it is, the guide to studying. I really think this is all you need to do in this class and just about any other class to be able to remember material, not just for tomorrow, not just for the exam in a couple weeks, not just for a final at the end of the semester, but actually forever, right? So you're going to read a short section, a couple paragraphs worth at the most, maybe 10, 15 minutes worth of reading at the most, and then take a pause, not a break, okay? Breaks are important. We'll talk about those on another day. Right? Now we're just taking a pause, and you're thinking, reflecting, or maybe writing some notes about what you've just read. First thing you might do is, can I think of any real-life examples? Those are self-references. Okay? You have to hand in 2 per module, but if you're doing this right, you're going to have way more than 2. Okay? Also, rephrase definitions, but I really want you to broaden that a little bit. I wrote it here as rephrase definitions because I wanted to connect it to the self-reference assignment, because that's what I'm asking you to do. You're going to take a definition, put that definition into your own words, and then come up with a real-life example of that term. But in general, read a paragraph, rephrase that whole paragraph. Try to explain that paragraph to somebody else in your own words. Right? You're trying to teach this material. Ask anybody, ask any teacher when they learned the material in their class the best. And they're very likely to tell you, the first time I taught it. Right? So you're coming up with real-life examples, you're putting things into your own words, and then you're practicing retrieval. You're testing yourself on what you just read. You just wrote down maybe this paragraph in your own words. Cover it up. Can you remember it? Okay. You see a key term. Try to remember the definition. Then click on it and test and see if you got it right. Okay. And when I say be careful about other strategies, I'm saying all the things that you might have been doing that are different from this. Right? So, for example, if you do what is probably the most common strategy students use, that is rereading. Okay, you read something and then you go back and you read it again for as much time as you have. Don't do that. It's probably not helping you. And you might say, no, I've been successful because of my strategies up until now. I would say no, it's probably more likely that you've been successful in spite of your strategies. Right? That these strategies are very, very likely going to be more effective. Okay? Now, this is all while you're reading individual paragraphs or individual short sections. At the end of that, that's when you practice retrieval after reading. Those are the quizzes. Those are the Blackboard quizzes. And then you'll get that formative assessment piece from the quizzes, and so you can go back. Oh yeah, I got that question about psychophysics wrong. So you go back and see, maybe your self-reference wasn't that good, or maybe you couldn't think of one then. Try harder. Think of one. Maybe you didn't do a good job of putting it into your own words. Try harder, right? So, and again, you're focusing principally on the sections that correspond to questions that you got wrong. Okay? And that's the between quizzes, return to these strategies. Right? You're going to go back, look at individual concepts, and generate more self-references, rephrase definitions, rephrase paragraphs, practice retrieval on the fly as well. I realize what I've just told you to do. Right? I get it. You might take each quiz 10 times. That's 160 quizzes. I just told you. Essentially, put the entire textbook into your own words. Come up with real-life examples throughout the textbook. Okay? This is hard work. But here's what you need to realize. It's supposed to be hard. Nobody ever said college was supposed to be easy. Okay? And unfortunately, for a lot of students, they don't do a lot of work in college, right? They worked harder in high school, right? Because at least in high school, you're there 7 hours a day. In college, they get here and they say, oh my gosh, 12 credit hours? I only have to go to school for 12 hours a week and I'm a full-time student? And the reason that they do that is because our classes are developed with the assumption that for every hour you spend in class, you're spending 2 hours outside of class. So 12 credit hours plus 24 out-of-class hours corresponds to a 36-hour full-time job. It's supposed to be that way. Now, if you're sitting there saying, there's no way, I just don't have time to do that, well, then you really need to use these strategies because they're the more effective ones. Right? So you do these strategies for as much time as you do have available, and you'll do better than what's currently happening. Okay? Now, these types of difficulties, they refer to them as desirable difficulties. So taking a quiz today, getting 15 out of 15 questions right, and then taking it a week from now, and all of a sudden getting 5 of those questions wrong that you'd gotten right previously, that's frustrating, that's hard, but that's important. That's what's going to help you to learn this material. Okay? So we're looking for these difficulties that help us putting textbook material into your own words. That's hard, but it's very, very effective. Okay. So let's think for a couple minutes. College, of course, has changed in lots and lots of ways, and I'm talking about since I was a student. I graduated from high school in 1981. Okay? Obviously, it's changed tons of ways, not the least of which is how much more expensive it's gotten. Okay? But I'm focusing on one specific change, and that is in the early 1980s, if you got a college degree, it was basically a guarantee that you were going to get a better job. All you needed was a degree, guarantee of a better job. That's not true anymore. There are news stories all over the place about people who are doubting the value of a college education. Right? They're complaining and saying, hey, I went to school for 4 years, I have $100,000 in loans, and I'm working retail, right? Doing something that does not require a college degree. And the reason is, as I said, the degree isn't enough anymore. You actually have to acquire some skills. And unfortunately, a very significant number of students do not. So think about 2 related studies done on basically the same very, very large group of students throughout the United States. So a national study with thousands and thousands of student participants. In the first one that was presented in the book Academically Adrift, what the researchers found is that 35% of students made 0 gains during their college careers in critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing skills. 0 gains. Right? Wherever they were when they were freshmen, that's where they were when they were graduating seniors. Critical thinking, complex reasoning, and writing skills. It sounds a lot like understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create to me. Okay. A couple years later, they followed up with these very same students, who were no longer students, in Aspiring Adults Adrift. 35% who made no gains. That's pretty frightening. But you have to realize, there were some students who made moderate gains, and then there were also some students who made large gains. And so what the researchers did is they compared the people who made the most gains to the people who made the least gains a couple years after graduation. And the results were dramatic. The people who made the least gains were 3 times as likely, triple the unemployment rate. 3 times as likely to be unemployed. Yeah. If you're still unemployed 2 years after graduation, you're probably never going to catch up. You're going to give up, take a job that doesn't require a college education, and you'll be that person at 35 saying, I'm selling shirts, right? I'm working retail. I don't need a college degree to do this. I wasted my college education. Triple the unemployment rate. Credit card debt, very significantly higher among the students, the ex-students who had made the least gains. Not student loans, right? Everybody has student loans. Credit card debt. Right? You have to realize what credit card companies are trying to do. They're trying to get you to build up a balance as early as possible so you can literally have to pay interest to them for the rest of your life. You don't have to do that. You have to be here. Right? You have to be in college anyway. Might as well put in the work and make it help you. Look for opportunities to develop those skills. If you get into a class and there are a lot of papers, don't leave. Take that class. So, that's all I have to say about this. Again, I hope I was able to convince you to put in a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of time over this semester. If you do, I think you'll be really, really happy with the results.